By the time the alarms blared across the orbital habitat of Trinari Station, it was already too late for warning. Colley Vaughan had been sleeping, chest rising and falling with the slow rhythm of a displaced heart, when the walls shook and her cot skidded across the floor. The overhead lights stuttered, blinked red, and then failed completely, plunging the refugee dormitory into emergency gloom. The screaming didn't start until the station AI calmly announced, "Hull breach. Decks 7 through 10. Evacuate." She sat up, head pounding. The air smelled of burning ozone and scorched metal. Someone was already pounding on the bulkhead to the hallway. "They're boarding. Get out. Get out." Colley blinked away the sleep and shock. She grabbed her utility pack, slung it over her shoulder and ran. The exodus. She'd barely made it onto the evacuation transport before the station ruptured behind them. Trinari Station, home to almost 10,000 displaced citizens from shattered worlds, scattered in a burst of light and debris as pirate raiders ransacked the infrastructure for whatever the council hadn't decommissioned. And just like that, Colley was back in exile. Again. She stared out the transport window, watching the scattered husk of Trinari spiral into the void. Somewhere in that wreckage were her remaining belongings, the last printed image of her family, and the hand-stitched journal her mother gave her before the fall of Solara Prime. "First time being raided?" a voice asked beside her. A human by the look, broad-shouldered, blonde, with soot smudges across his cheek and a mechanic's badge hanging from his belt. He held out a canteen. "Name's Riven." "You, Colley." "And no," she said, voice flat. "Not the first." He nodded. "Fame. They hit Tirith Station last month. Seems like they're making a loop now." Colley turned back to the stars. She wanted to scream, but grief had hardened in her over the years, calcifying into something quieter. She took the canteen and drank. Cycle of the displaced. The refugee flotilla scattered, but a few ships, the lucky ones, reached safe harbor in the orbit of Hesker 4, a cold, mountainous world known for its strict immigration policies and defensive orbital grid. Hesker's government didn't want refugees. Not really. But with the Interstellar Accord watching, they had to pretend to care. That's how Colley found herself 1 week later, registered as temporary displaced individual number 88749, fingerprinted, iris-scanned, and shuttled into the Tundra Basin relocation zone. The zone was a rectangle of prefabricated shelters surrounded by frozen rock and barely functioning thermal barriers. Children huddled together near ration dispensers. Makeshift fires burned in metal drums. Drones hovered overhead, scanning for contraband and aggressive behavior. Colley huddled in her allocated cube and stared at her blank datapad, wondering if it was worth trying again. She'd been a linguistics apprentice once, fluent in 7 dialects, including ancient Ralathai script. But now she was nothing more than a number. Riven found her again 2 days later, carrying parts salvaged from a broken drone. "You fix things?" she asked. He grinned. "I break things. Then I fix them better. Wanna help?" A spark among the ashes. It started small, repairing old battery coils, redirecting thermal energy from storage tanks to warm the children's quarters. Then Riven suggested they build a signal array. "Not to contact anyone," he clarified. "To listen. If pirates are circling the cycle, we should know before they strike again." Colley agreed, her old skills stirring to life. She helped him reprogram an ancient relay unit. He showed her how to reroute leftover fusion cells. They worked side by side under the harsh Heskari moonlight, bundled in coats, their breath clouding in the air. As the weeks passed, others joined. Tents turned to stronger shelters. Drones began flying differently. Less invasive, more cooperative. The refugees were building a network. Hidden one. Something the Hesker government didn't like. Unwanted attention. It was subtle at first. Patrols lingering longer near their sector. Communications being randomly blocked. Then came the visit from Agent Mever, head of Hesker Planetary Security. He arrived in a black coat, his rank emblem gleaming. Behind him stood 2 armored guards and a translator drone. "You are Kalle Vorn?" he asked, not bothering to hide the distaste in his voice. "I am," she said. "You and Riven Halker have been modifying planetary assets. That violates Protocol 7C of the Displacement Agreement." "We're improving the camp's infrastructure," she replied, voice calm. "Keeping people alive. Survival is not your decision," Mever snapped. "You are here by the grace of Hesker." Later that night, Riven's tent was raided. They beat him. Took the prototype signal array. When Kalle rushed to the infirmary, he waved her off with a bloodied smile. "They can take the equipment," he said. "But they can't unteach what we've built." Whispers in the dark. It was a message from deep orbit that changed everything. The relay they'd hidden, buried in the spine of a broken mining rig, intercepted an encrypted burst 2 weeks later. A pirate ship, the Vulture's Grin, was planning another raid. Not on Hesker, on Pelion V, a farming world already on the edge of collapse. Kalle debated for hours before deciding. She slipped out of the camp, past the searchlights, and crossed the snowfields to a civilian comms tower. She hacked the terminal and sent a warning to the Accord fleet stationed near Pelion. And Hesker found out. Betrayal and blood. They arrested her at dawn. Publicly. Brutally. Agent Mever stood in front of the entire relocation zone and announced, "Kalle Vorn has violated planetary law by engaging in unauthorized communications with foreign militaries. She is to be deported and exiled permanently from Heskari territory." People screamed. Riven tried to intervene and was beaten again. Drones recorded everything, broadcasting it as a warning. But that message Kalle had sent. It worked. The Accord intercepted the pirates. Pelion survived. And Kalle was shoved aboard a prisoner transport bound for the Spine, a deep space penal colony known for eating the souls of those sent there. The long silence. Time slowed aboard the transport. Stripped of her possessions, bruised and cold, Kalle sat in a darkened cell with nothing but her thoughts. The guards never spoke. The lights flickered. Meals were gray paste. She began to wonder if she'd made a mistake. If survival for her people was worth her own destruction. But then came the jolt. Not of the ship, but of the cosmos shifting. The cell walls trembled. The lights went red. Emergency klaxons sounded. Not again, Kalle thought. Caught off guard again. But it wasn't pirates this time. It was Riven. He'd stolen a Hesker patrol cruiser, recruited other refugees and sympathetic station workers, and tracked the prisoner transport across 3 sectors. When the ship breached the transport's hull, Kalle thought she was hallucinating. The bulkhead opened, hissed, and there he stood. Suit half charred, a blaster in one hand and his crooked grin in the other. "Told you," he said, hauling her up. "Can't unteach what we've built." They escaped into the stars, with the Accord closing in behind them. The cycle begins anew. They didn't return to Hesker. Instead, they headed to a rogue world known as Kirill's Edge, a haven for outlaws, smugglers, and the forgotten. But this time they weren't just refugees.